This is Newark Today, WBGO's award-winning call-in show. We're discussing the issues affecting New Jersey's largest city. And now your host, Andrew Meyer.
Election Day in Newark is just about a month away, and while a lot of attention has been on the mayor's race, every single council seat is contested this go-around. In an election year that started nasty, well, it's gone downhill from there. On the first half of the program, we will be drilling down on the key issues in the races this year, and we've got a trio of experts who can give you the inside look. Jonathan Wharton is a professor of political science at Stevens Institute of Technology and the author of A Post-Racial Change is Going to Come, Newark, Cory Booker, and the Transformation of Urban America. Jonathan, welcome to Newark Today.
Thank you for having me.
Mark Bonamo is a reporter for PolitickerNJ.com who's been keeping close tabs on the Newark races this year. Mark, it's good to have you with us.
Great to be here.
And David Cruz is a correspondent with NJTV News and the founding host of Newark Today. David, welcome back to the program.
I love what you've done with the place,
And, of course, you are an essential part of tonight's conversation. What's important to you in the election this year? We want to hear about the issues more than the candidates. This is your chance to engage in what we hope will be a lively and constructive conversation this evening. You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. You can email us. That address is newarktoday@wbgo.org. And you can join in the conversation on social media at facebook.com/NewarkToday and on Twitter at Andrew Meyer WBGO. A program note. Coming up in the second half of our show, we will be joined by Senator Cory Booker. So if you have any questions about what's going on in Washington and how the senator is representing you there, he'll be with us at 8:30. Let's start with the mayor's race, guys. This has evolved into a two-man race between Councilman Ras Baraka and former Assistant Attorney General Shavar Jeffries. What's the biggest issue driving this contest? We'll go across the board. David Cruz, you get to go first.
Well, I mean, I think there's several issues. You know, there is this sense of this is, Newark after Booker, and people are kind of torn between, do they want an anti-Booker or do they want someone who's kind of close to Booker or Booker-ish? And I think that, as from the macro view, that's what it's about. But I mean, there's also crime as always, and unemployment as always, and the educational system as always, which is frequently the case here in Newark. It's those are usually the top three issues, with taxes right in there at number 4, probably.
Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com.
I would agree with Mr. Cruz, but I think the two particular issues that are critical are the future of Newark schools and public safety. I think public safety speaks for itself. There were 111 murders in Newark last year. But in terms of education, it's become quite complicated. Newark School Superintendent Cammy Anderson released her One Newark plan in December. The release of that plan has proved to be quite controversial. This plan calls for an increased use of charter schools. 20% of Newark students are already in charter schools. However, the way this plan was rolled out has caused a lot of controversy and added a lot of heat to the debate in the Newark mayoral race.
Jonathan Wharton from Stevens Institute of Technology, you have anything to add to these issues?
Education is going to be the key factor here. Yes, always public safety. That's pretty much a given, and certainly the candidates have been speaking towards that. But there's no question when it comes down to education and the reform and the changes that are necessary. And, there is some concern about what is going to happen with Newark post Cory Booker. But it's time for Newark to move on. I'm very interested to see what the candidate's going to be with these issues, but education is definitely, I think, the focal point. And you've seen this, obviously, at the meetings, with the school board meetings, so absolutely.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. On this first half of the program, we are talking about Newark politics, the upcoming elections in Newark. To get in on this conversation this evening, you can call us at 1-800-499-9246, 1-800-499-9246. This campaign for mayor started out heated, and it's really devolved into a nasty race. Not that Newark elections aren't usually rough and tumble. We have a history of that here.
Yes.
But the most dramatic instance was the burning of Ras Baraka's campaign bus, and there have been some new developments on this today. Mark Bonamo, you've been following this closely. Why don't you bring us up to date with the latest?
As of today, Sharif Nash was arrested and charged, according to the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, for his alleged role in the bus burning of the Baraka campaign bus. Mr. Nash was driving the van that was allegedly involved in the incident. Another man, Michael Benkowski, was arrested last week in connection. Both Mr. Benkowski and Mr. Nash, according to ELEC reports, were employed by the Shavar Jeffries campaign. This is according to state ELEC reports. So the fact that this has taken place, again, adds a degree of controversy to an already controversial and heated race in Newark. Any big city has issues like this before. Both in Newark, Jersey City, Patterson, you'll see it.
Now, in light of the announcement from the prosecutor's office today, both campaigns put out statements.
That's correct.
And neither one is really all that direct. In the case of the Baraka campaign, they're applauding the actions of the prosecutor.
Right.
They don't come out directly and attack the Shavar Jeffries campaign, but they hint at that. And meanwhile, from the Jeffries campaign, you have a statement saying that they applaud the decisive action without really acknowledging the connection with these two men who have been arrested so far in this crime.
That's correct. And according to the American legal system, of course, we all have rights. Both of these men are innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, in terms of Newark street politics, people have already in many ways made up their mind potentially. And what people are going to say to each other in the next 32 days before the election will be interesting.
David Cruz, Newark politics, rough and tumble. You know this from firsthand experience covering many campaigns here, especially in the mayoral level. Does this seem any worse than what you've seen in the past?
I was saying to someone the other day that it seemed kind of calm, actually. I mean, aside from the bus burning, which, wasn't much of a burning, frankly. But just, in terms of that thing, which I think ultimately is a big distraction and generates more heat than light. But early on when this happened, the Baraka campaign made it very clear that they implicated the Jeffries camp in this. But ultimately, this kind of stuff really serves to distract from really the major issues that are at play in the city. But I mean, it's what people turn on to. I mean, if you talk to people now, the last couple of days, last week or whatever, about this race, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, that's the one where they burned the bus." In fact, Baraka was on our air the other day, and
NJTV.
Yeah, and Mike Schneider asked him, what's the biggest thing that happened to you during this, or something like that, and he had the line of the week, which was, "They burned my bus." So I mean, it's on top of everybody's heads, but ultimately, it doesn't help Newarkers decide who is the best person to lead their city.
Jonathan Wharton from Stevens Institute, as somebody who's familiar with Newark politics over the long haul, we've got a tradition here where, typically you got campaigns going around pulling down the opponent's signs and whatnot. There were accusations back when Sharp James was mayor that he had his police officers going around and pulling down signs. Are we seeing anything out of the ordinary during this campaign?
No, I don't think so at all. And if anything, I mean, the break-ins with the campaign offices in the past as well, the tearing down of the signs, the harassment of officials coming into businesses, that's kind of atypical in Newark. And I don't think it's just exclusive to Newark. I mean, you hear this even in Jersey City and other cities in North Jersey. So, but this I find is unusual. I mean, who's to blame for this in the first place? I mean, I think a lot of people are curious who's behind doing the bombing of the bus and why? What are they out for? And it's interesting in terms of the timing, but I think the press is making a bigger deal out of it than they should. I think, as David brought up, there are core issues that are imperative facing this election.
I will also just add to that just because it's been relatively calm before today doesn't mean that the last 30 days of this campaign are not going to get wild, because there is a lot at stake here. And aside from, if you talk about the philosophical future of, Newark, et cetera, there are millions and millions of dollars at stake here. The city budget and ultimately maybe control of the school budget, which is almost $1 billion. Right. All the patronage, all of that stuff is really, a big issue that drives a lot of people's participation in this.
There's a lot of interest there.
Mark Bonamo.
And I would have to say that, whatever's going to happen in the next 32 days with the election, if it's things like a bus burning or other type of street activities, it's going to distract from critical issues like a $40 million potential structural deficit in the budget.
Exactly.
With the state controller's office saying we might financially take over the city of Newark. So whoever's going to be mayor on July 1st has real problems to deal with.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We are talking about the upcoming elections in Newark. To share your own thoughts with our panel of experts, you can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's toll free, 1-800-499-9246. David Cruz from NJTV News brought up the whole issue of money, and I actually want to circle around to the influence of money in this race. Where's the money coming from in these races? Who is putting it in there? Who's got the advantage at this point? Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com.
This campaign, in many ways, has turned into a proxy gubernatorial battle between North Jersey and South Jersey. Steve Fulop, the mayor of Jersey City, who many believe will be a Democratic gubernatorial candidate, has put both his endorsement and significant funds behind Ross Baraka. On the other side, we've reported at PolitickerNJ.com that Essex County Executive Joseph DiVincenzo and South Jersey power broker George Norcross or representatives of Mr. Norcross, I should say, have spoken to Mr. Jeffries, suggesting a North and South Jersey alliance to get Mr. Jeffries elected.
Meanwhile, Senate President Steve Sweeney says he's staying mum.
Correct, but yesterday, Politicker NJ reported a story where the campaign group, a Philadelphia-based political media group, which has long been although they've been a representative for candidates around the country, they've been strongly behind Steve Sweeney and Donald Norcross, Mr. Norcross's brother. Through documents found through Cablevision, it was revealed the campaign group paid for the independent expenditure ad that the current media buy for Sir Var Jeffries right now, the Newark First Independent Expenditure Group.
So essentially what you're saying is what we are seeing in terms of who's lining up on each side is a division along the traditional Democratic foes within New Jersey, each picking their side.
Yes, and you will see independent expenditure money rolling in hard.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. It's election time coming up in Newark, Election Day, May 13th. We're talking about the mayoral races. We'll get to the council races in just a moment. And if you want to get in here with your own question, you can call us at 1-800-499-9246. We're going to the phones now. Lisa in the Central Ward is joining us on the program. Lisa, welcome to Newark Today. What's your question for these guys tonight?
Hi, thank you so much. I'd like to know why they are saying that the bus bombing is not significant. As a voter and a resident and a homeowner in Central Ward, I don't agree that it's not significant. And for me, it was one of the things that helped me decide who I was going to go with. So I just want to know, what's the rationale for saying it's not significant? It was an act of violence, right? It's unacceptable. So how is it not significant? I don't understand.
Well, Lisa, it's all of those things that you said it is, but ultimately, after the election, how much of a significance is that bombing or the burning of that bus going to have on the mayor's ability to run the city or the city council's ability to function as a city council? I know what you're saying, that it is a violent act and it does say something about this campaign, but ultimately my point of view is that once you go forward and you get past this political environment, it doesn't really have much of an impact on how the city's run. That's
David
what
Cruz from NJTV News. Jonathan Wharton, you want to get in on this?
Lisa, not to mention, too, I mean, in the past, you've seen all kinds of harassment issues taking place. So this is not unusual, and it's not the first time. And
it's not to make light of it.
Right, of course not. And it's one, again, that I connect back to, was it just these two men who did it alone? Was there another connection? We don't know that yet until it gets fleshed out, obviously, in the courts. So I think it's best that we just kind of stay clear of this and see what happens when it goes through the legal system.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Lisa, thank you so much for calling this evening. If you have your own question you want to get in the mix, we've got our panel of experts on the elections for the first half of this show. You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. A reminder, joining us at the bottom of the hour, Senator Cory Booker. Somebody was chomping to get in at the bit here. I think it's you, David Cruz.
I wanted to just ask Lisa. She said that it helped her decide who she was going to vote for. I wanted to just see who she decided to vote for.
Lisa's already off the line.
Yeah.
Right. I hope Lisa's still listening to say that while the bus burning is obviously disturbing, at the same time, this election isn't just about a bus burning. It is about control.
Right.
It is about who is going to control the state's largest city, Newark.
Newark Today is on WBGO and WBGO.org. You can get in on the conversation yourself by calling us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. Programming note here, if you want to get a chance to hear each of the candidates in their own words coming up on WBGO, we will have conversations, one-on-one conversations with each of them coming up at NJPAC. First up, Shavar Jeffries on Monday, April 14th at 7 p.m. The following Monday, it's one-on-one with Raz Baraka. WBGO will stream each conversation live on our website at WBGO.org. We will broadcast the interview the following Sunday at 9 a.m. This is not the race that we thought it was going to be last year. Back when it started, there were 4 candidates, including Councilman Darren Sharif and the heir apparent to Mayor Booker at the time, Councilman Anibal Ramos. But then a few months ago, in the course of just 24 hours, both of them dropped out and they backed Shavar Jeffries. And it doesn't seem like it's made a whole lot of difference. And Jonathan Wharton, you're chomping at the bit here.
I am really, because I was in shock about that. And I was speaking to a lot of people about how the dropout happened at the same time, the same day. Oddly enough, I was down at Rutgers giving a lecture down there when I got wind of it. And Cory Booker was speaking later on about what he's left behind. And so that, I'm quite frankly glad to see just a two-man race. Because, frequently in Newark, you see all these candidates who come out. And to make it a little bit simpler on the voter, I think it makes a difference. But to see the other two drop out, especially Ramos, as you said, Councilman Ramos, that was a big surprise to me because I thought, there was at least some serious interest, on his part.
Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com, we've been talking over the course of this campaign, and I know that from the beginning you had some doubts about the viability of Ramos's campaign. There were questions early on about whether he was going to be dropping out, which in the end proved to be true.
Right. In many ways, I would hedge that remark by saying this. There were constant doubts whether he was staying in, staying out. We wrote about that constantly. But at the same time, Anibal Ramos is just as viable as anybody else to be the Newark mayoral candidate. He has a solid record in the North Ward. He is a representative of the Hispanic community, a demographic group that is rising in Newark, and then in time will be the majority community in Newark.
David Cruz, for a while it looked like possibly this was going to be a race that pitted the Latinos in Newark versus the African Americans in Newark. That did not play out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's not quite as simple as that. I mean, obviously, you have Anibal Ramos, who is, has a lot of support among Latinos in Newark, but ultimately, we were talking about him dropping out way back. I mean, late last year, they were talking about him dropping out when he looked like much more of a viable candidate. And the polling suggested that he would have gotten into a runoff with Ras Baraka. But I think that they figured that he would lose ultimately in a runoff to Baraka. But the whole question of Latinos in Newark is one that probably deserves a whole other segment on the show. But, you have the Puerto Rican base in the city, but there's also, Portuguese and Spaniards and Brazilians down neck who have cultural differences as well as political differences with the Puerto Ricans in the North Ward and Central Ward, et cetera. And then there's this growing population of new immigrants, many of whom are not registered voters, but many of whom are upwardly mobile and will become registered voters. And there's a certain amount of, knowledge or what's the word I'm looking for? There's a certain sense that those people will tend to be more conservative, which is a whole different thing, And
I'm especially interested in the Dominican population, too, rising. And
they're a growing population.
Let alone Latin America,
Obviously an issue to be continued in the future. This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We're talking about next month's elections in Newark. With us for the first half of the evening, Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com, Jonathan Wharton, a political scientist at Stevens Institute of Technology, and David Cruz from NJTV News. We want to hear from you. Call us at 1-800-499-9246. Bill from the Bronx is joining us on the program now. Bill, welcome to Newark Today.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. It sounded strange to me that that the bombing of Mr. Baraka's bus happened, and it seemed like it was taken light on my end. This man's father was considered the poet laureate of New Jersey during the time that he's campaigning. Excuse me, that doesn't sound like it's just coincidental with me. Come on. Was that an incidental thing that, okay, there was nobody in that bus?
Okay, Bill, to be clear, the bus was not actually bombed. It's been inadvertently referred to as that, but the bus was set on fire, and the fire damage from the pictures I've seen was not that severe. It was vandalism.
What about the sugar put in
and
the
sugar,
tank?
and there was sugar put in the engine as well. It was vandalism. It was politically motivated vandalism, it seems.
We don't mean to downplay the what was essentially an act of violence. But again, when we report on that, it's easy to sensationalize it, as we just said there. I mean, a lot of people refer to the bus bombing, and it has this terrible image of a bus bombed and people being injured and so on. It was hardly that. But it's not an insignificant thing. But ultimately, what I think I was trying to say was that what happens after we all forget about the bus burning and the new mayor is in office, how does that bus burning, which will have happened many months before the new mayor comes on, how does that affect the way the city goes forward? And ultimately, it's minimal.
Thank you very much, Bill, for your call this evening. This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left in this segment, and I do want to get to the council races because there's a lot going on there. I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time to do enough on that. But as far as they are concerned, I wouldn't exactly call it a free-for-all, but every single seat is contested, and I did a head count this afternoon. There are 18 candidates vying for 5 at-large seats. Yeah. What are some of the dynamics that we see going on in the council races this year, gentlemen? Who wants to go first? Mark Bonamo, you're on the hot seat.
The politicker guy.
Mark Bonamo for PolitickerNJ.com.
Well, there are a couple of races we've been particularly interested in. Mm-hmm. One is the South Ward. The South Ward, you have John Sharp James on the Baraka tickets. John Sharp James, the son of Newark Mayor Sharp James, mayor from 1986 to 2006. So again, it becomes the power of family names in Newark politics, so critical, where you have the Payne name, the Rice name, the James name. Up against him with the Jeffries ticket is Brian Logan. Brian Logan is the football coach for Week Wake High School and has done an excellent job and also has real viability in the community. From an institution, Week Wake High School, of course, the institution where famed Pulitzer Prize winning author Philip Roth attended, it has real power in the neighborhood. So that's going to be a major contest.
Okay. Where are some of the other races?
I live in the East Ward. I live down Neck. And Augusto Amador, the 16-year incumbent, now is facing a real and true challenge. He's facing a challenge from Louis Correa, from Omar Nieves, from Jonathan Seabra of the restaurant family fame in Newark. There may very well be a runoff in the East Ward.
Overall, does this really come down to a battle between Jeffries-aligned candidates and Baraka-aligned candidates?
I will just say that I don't know, just from what I've seen, and I'm sure there's some polling out there to suggest this, but I think the way the race looks now is that Jeffries is really trailing, and he needs to close the gap before he can have any kind of coattails. And I think that right now he's really got to concentrate on trying to become mayor and then worry about his council candidates afterwards. That's not to say that the dynamic between the city council and the new mayor will not be really interesting, because as you see with Cory Booker, he came in with, I guess, 8 of 9 council members or something.
All nine.
And by the time he left,
the fallout was
they were
tremendous.
Kicking him as he left the door. So that dynamic is really interesting, and there's so much money, again, at stake here that the council and the city, the mayor, always battle over.
And this is a good segue here. speaking of money again, getting back to the mayor's race, I want to bring up the issue of economic development. Cory Booker caught a fair amount of flack for all the time he spent away from the city while he was mayor. He argued it was in part to generate investment in Newark. With Booker gone and a very different administration now in control of City Hall, where does economic development stand? And going forward under either Baraka or Jeffries administration, what are we looking at? And I know, Jonathan Wharton from Stevens Institute of Technology, this is something you're very much interested in.
This is definitely my policy area that I've been following for years. And, you know, the thing about Cory Booker was that he at least planted the seeds. He began the process of going out and, yes, fundraising, doing a lot of philanthropy. He always talks about how he was able to raise over $400 million by doing this. So whoever does take the reins next, including even the council candidates who are on those tickets that David brought up, that's important. And the thing is, can they get outside of the downtown development? I know there's a lot of concern about looking in the other wards, particularly the South Ward, I hear over and over again. So, you know, this is critical. Whoever is going to bring this on has to recognize that. And I think among the candidates, Barack, you know, as Ras Barack has brought that up over and over again, and you do hear Jeffries from time to time, but that is important. I mean, that in talking certainly with the Councilman Baraka, he's made that key issue to bring some of the development to the other wards, and that is critical.
Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com.
It is certainly true that there's been a lot of development in downtown Newark, and whoever the next mayor of Newark is needs to be a good manager of that development. But at the same time, neighborhoods like the Ironbound, Vailsburg, Roseville, Forest Hill are all going to need, the South Ward, of course, all need effective development as well. And I hope that the next mayor pays attention to those neighborhoods outside of the downtown core as well.
David Cruz from NJTV News. This is something that we've heard a lot in our years covering Newark.
Yeah.
It seems like, is there one candidate over the other who's speaking more towards more even investment across the entire city as opposed to focus in the downtown area?
It's interesting that earlier in the campaign, Ras Baraka made a big effort to reach out to the business community to say, you know, I'm not a lion or a tiger or a bear, because he kind of comes off, I don't know, surly maybe? What are the words?
Showman. Yeah.
But, and I think the business community had some concerns about that.
Right.
But also on the other side, Shavar Jeffries, you know, has not articulated, I don't think, effectively a vision for Newark's economic future. Ras Baraka made a point the other day, not to plug NJTV, but he was on our air the other day.
Feel free.
And he mentioned something that Steve Fulop has implemented in Jersey City, which is to rework the tax abatement policy so that if you want to develop downtown, you're going to get a smaller tax abatement. But if you develop in the West Ward or the South Ward or Central Ward, or maybe not the Central Ward is doing pretty good in terms of getting new development.
Correct.
But some of the outlying areas of the city, you'll get a larger tax abatement. So that's something that has worked and shown some that it's paid some dividends in Jersey City. Ras Baraka talked about bringing that to Newark.
That only started a few months ago in Jersey City, and especially as a resident over there, and something I've been following with Steve Fulop. I mean, I think the jury's still out on that.
Well,
And
I mean,
I'm curious to see how long that'll kind of flesh out.
It helped to spur some development in Journal Square.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's all theory at this point.
It really is.
Yeah.
And even some controversy in last night's meeting to begin with in Jersey City for the development there. Yeah.
Gentlemen, this is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Thanks to Mark Bonamo from PolitickerNJ.com, Jonathan Wharton, political scientist at Stevens Institute of Technology, and David Cruz from NJTV News. Thanks, guys. We may have you back in the second half, so don't go anywhere. Also, when we come back, Senator Cory Booker.